Armbar assembly line activated. 25 seconds. That's how long Ronda Rousey's first professional MMA opponent lasted before tapping to an armbar so violent it looked like voluntary destruction. Idiane Gomez probably had time to regret her career choices mid-flight. Between March 2011 and February 2013, Rousey went 7-0 with an average fight time of just over 1 minute. She wasn't fighting. She was speed running the women's bantamweight division, like a video game speed run. Her armbar became so inevitable that watching her fights felt like witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Opponents knew exactly what was coming and still couldn't stop it. When the UFC finally signed women in 2012, Dana White, who had previously sworn women would never fight in the UFC, handed Rousey the inaugural bantamweight title without her throwing a single UFC punch. It was the most obvious decision in combat sports history. Her first title defense against Liz Carmouche drew 450,000 pay-per-view buys. Her second, against Miesha Tate, did even better. By 2015, Rousey wasn't just the face of women's MMA, she was outselling male champions, appearing in movies with Vin Diesel and hosting Saturday Night Live. She had turned armbar submissions into mainstream entertainment, proving that violence could be both efficient and profitable when packaged correctly. The unbeatable aura myth. Rousey's team built an invincibility narrative so convincing that even she started believing it. Her coach Edmond Tarverdian told media that Ronda could beat male bantamweights and compete in professional boxing, claims so absurd they should have come with disclaimer labels. Joe Rogan famously declared she could beat half the male bantamweight roster on any given night, which was either passionate commentary or experimental performance art disguised as fight analysis. The media amplified every word. Magazine covers proclaimed her the world's most dangerous woman. Talk show hosts treated her like a superhero who accidentally wandered into real life. Corporate sponsors lined up to attach their brands to someone who seemed genuinely unstoppable. Even Ronda bought into the mythology, claiming in interviews that she could beat Floyd Mayweather in a ruleless fight, a statement so disconnected from reality it probably violated several laws of physics. Nobody questioned whether her competition was actually elite or just unprepared for her judo. Her opponents were experienced fighters, sure, but most came from regional circuits with limited striking defense and zero armbar prevention training. The UFC women's division was so young that being the best meant being slightly less terrible than everyone else. Rousey was thriving in a shallow talent pool, but her team convinced the world and themselves that she was competing against world-class competition. Reality would arrive soon enough with leg kicks and precision striking, but for now, the illusion was perfect. Holly Holm's head kick heard worldwide. November 14, 2015, in Melbourne, Australia, became the night invincibility died on pay-per-view. Holly Holm, a 33-year-old multiple-time world boxing champion who had defended titles 18 times across 3 weight classes, entered as a 10-to-1 underdog that Vegas bookmakers treated like a guaranteed payday. Rousey's camp dismissed her as just a boxer who wouldn't survive the clinch. They were catastrophically wrong. For 4.5 minutes, Holm gave Rousey a striking clinic that belonged in instructional videos. She circled away from Ronda's charges, jabbed her face into hamburger meat, and made the unbeatable champion look like someone who'd never seen a boxing ring before. Every time Rousey rushed forward with her signature bull rush technique, Holm stepped aside and punished her with counterpunches. It was technical brilliance versus brute force, and technique was winning by unanimous decision in the court of physics. Then came the 59-second mark of round 2. Holm threw a left head kick that connected with Rousey's neck with the sound of a baseball bat hitting a watermelon. Ronda collapsed face first onto the canvas, unconscious before she hit the ground. Holm followed with 2 ground strikes for good measure before the referee pulled her off. The knockout became an instant internet phenomenon, replayed millions of times by viewers who couldn't believe what they'd witnessed. The aura of invincibility had been destroyed in 1080p high definition, and suddenly, everyone remembered that undefeated records are just statistics waiting for the right opponent. The silent aftermath disaster. Rousey's response to defeat was to essentially vanish from public existence like a celebrity entering witness protection. She skipped the mandatory post-fight press conference, reportedly because she was hospitalized with a split lip and concussion, though Dana White claimed she was too emotionally devastated to face cameras. Fair enough. But then, the silence stretched from days into weeks, then months, as if losing a fight was somehow more shameful than continuing to exist. Her Her first post-knockout interview came on Ellen DeGeneres' show, where she admitted having extremely dark thoughts about her future in the immediate aftermath. It was raw, honest, and deeply concerning, but also revealed how completely her identity had fused with being unbeatable. When asked about her plans, she mentioned possibly retiring and starting a family with boyfriend Travis Brown, as if professional fighting had become too psychologically dangerous to continue. The woman who once claimed she could beat men was now considering retirement after a single loss. Social media turned vicious. The same fans who'd worshipped her weeks earlier now mocked her chin, her striking, and her coach's advice to head movement while standing completely still. Memes flooded the internet showing the knockout from every conceivable angle. Instead of acknowledging the criticism and rebuilding, Rousey retreated further into isolation, staying off social media entirely. It was the exact opposite of how champions typically respond to defeat. No fire, no promises of redemption, just radio silence, punctuated by occasional celebrity sightings. For someone who'd built a career on confidence bordering on arrogance, the psychological collapse was almost more shocking than the physical knockout itself. Edmond Tarverdyan's striking delusion. The real villain of Rousey's downfall wasn't Holly Holm. It was her head coach, Edmond Tarverdyan, a man who convinced an Olympic judoka that she could box. Tarverdyan ran Glendale Fighting Club in California, where he transformed Ronda's world-class grappling into mediocre striking through sheer confidence and questionable coaching credentials. His strategic advice during the home fight literally consisted of yelling, "head movement," while Ronda stood flat-footed, eating jabs like a heavy bag with a ponytail. Video footage from her training camp showed Tarverdyan praising Ronda's striking combinations with the enthusiasm of a proud parent watching their kid's first piano recital, completely ignoring that her technique looked like someone having a seizure while swinging pool noodles. He told media that Ronda's boxing was beautiful and world-class, statements so detached from reality they should have required drug testing. Meanwhile, actual boxing coaches watched her fights and wondered if Edmond had ever seen a professional boxer before. The MMA community begged Rousey to find new coaching. Analysts pointed out her defensive flaws on broadcasts. Fans created YouTube breakdowns showing how her striking left her vulnerable to literally anyone with basic counterpunching skills, but Ronda stayed loyal to Edmond, possibly because he never challenged her invincibility narrative, or because changing camps would require admitting she'd been training incorrectly for years. That loyalty would prove more damaging than any head kick, because when she returned to fight Amanda Nunes 13 months later, she brought the same striking coach, the same flawed technique, and the same delusional game plan that had failed so spectacularly in Melbourne. Amanda Nunes's 48-second execution. Rousey's comeback fight on December 30th, 2016 lasted exactly 48 seconds, barely long enough to work up a decent sweat. Amanda Nunes, the reigning bantamweight champion, greeted Ronda with a flurry of punches so violent it looked like a planned demolition disguised as a sporting event. Rousey backpedaled immediately, covering her face while Nunes stalked forward, throwing combinations that would have made Mike Tyson nod in approval. The striking differential was embarrassing. Nunes landed 27 significant strikes while Rousey connected with exactly 3, and those 3 probably only landed because Amanda briefly blinked. Ronda never attempted a takedown, never threw her signature judo hip toss, never tried to drag the fight to the ground where she might have had a chance. Instead, she tried to box with a Brazilian knockout artist who hits like a truck with anger management issues. It was strategic disaster executed with remarkable efficiency. Referee Herb Dean stopped the fight after Rousey absorbed a final combination against the cage, mercifully ending the beating before permanent damage occurred. Ronda walked out of the octagon and directly into retirement, announcing weeks later that she was done with MMA forever. No rematch requests, no promises to rebuild, just immediate exit from a sport that had exposed her limitations in front of millions of viewers. The woman who once finished fights in seconds had been finished in seconds herself, and this time there would be no comeback to her. Her 12-2 career record told the story of a dominant champion who never learned how to lose gracefully or adapt when faced with adversity. WWE's scripted safety net. Rousey fled to professional wrestling in 2018, trading real violence for choreographed entertainment, where losing didn't require emergency dental work. WWE welcomed her with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for returning war heroes, giving her a WrestleMania debut against Triple H and Stephanie McMahon alongside Kurt Angle. For someone who'd just been knocked out twice in 13 months, fake fighting probably felt like a mental health intervention disguised as a career move. The transition made perfect sense. Wrestling offered everything MMA had denied her: guaranteed victories, scripted promos that couldn't be interrupted by fists, and opponents who weren't actually trying to separate her consciousness from her body. She won the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania 35, main eventing the show alongside Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. A historic moment that proved you could fail spectacularly in real combat and still headline fake combat 6 months later. But even in wrestling's safety, Rousey's competitive ego created problems. She complained about fans booing her despite being scripted as a villain, seemingly confused that professional wrestling required acting skills beyond scowling. After 17 months, she left WWE to start a family, returning sporadically for special appearances where she could control her schedule. The woman who once claimed she could beat male fighters had found peace in an industry where the outcomes were predetermined and the punches stopped 6 inches from your face. It wasn't the legacy she'd imagined, but at least nobody was kicking her head off on live television anymore. The pioneer who refused to evolve. Ronda Rousey's legacy exists in permanent contradiction. She simultaneously opened every door for women's MMA while proving exactly how not to walk through them. Before her, female fighters were relegated to smaller promotions and treated like novelty acts. After her UFC debut, women headlined pay-per-views, earned 6-figure purses, and became legitimate stars. Fighters like Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko, and Rose Namajunas owe their careers to Rousey proving that women could sell tickets and generate revenue. But her downfall exposed the danger of believing your own mythology. She had Olympic-level judo, legitimate submission skills, and the kind of star power that transcends sport, yet she wasted it all by refusing to acknowledge her weaknesses until they knocked her unconscious. If she'd hired proper striking coaches, diversified her game, and approached losses as learning opportunities instead of apocalyptic events, she might have evolved into a complete fighter who ruled for years instead of months. Instead, we're left with a cautionary tale about wasted potential wrapped inside genuine achievement. Rousey changed women's combat sports forever, made millions of dollars, and became a household name, then imploded so spectacularly that her final fights are studied as examples of what happens when ego replaces evolution. She built a revolution, set it on fire, and walked away before seeing what could have been built from the ashes. That's not a bad legacy, it's just an incomplete one that leaves everyone wondering what might have happened if the pioneer had stuck around long enough to actually explore the territory she'd discovered.